Hi there, and welcome to One Idea Away, not just a podcast, but a community and ongoing conversation meant to inspire and empower individuals to live more fully, deeply, and consciously. Let's jump into today's episode right now. Hey there, everyone. I want to begin with a question for you. What does being boss mean to you? Where does your mind go when you hear that phrase? Does it drift to an image of running the show, being the head cheese, as it were? Does it conjure up authority? Or might it be more of a mindset, a way of owning who you are and what you do? Well, our conversation today is very much going to focus on that latter image. You know, I hear more and more from clients, whether they're going into coach training or pursuing the One Idea Away community, I'm hearing on so many different levels how people are seeking a different form of freedom and meaning within their lives and their careers, more so than ever before. And that freedom is not simply a circumstantial one, meaning it's not simply about doing what you want, when you want, with whom you want. It's more about alignment with who they really are and having a total quality of life. They want to contribute in a way that speaks to their gifts and values and makes a meaningful difference in their own eyes. And I think that trend is why my guest today in her podcast, about to be her book, has really caught on, because she speaks directly to this audience, which I'd call the new entrepreneur. Now, when I say new, I'm not speaking about the idea of being a new business, a new startup. I mean, this is a new type of entrepreneur that is looking at how they run their business and how they run their life in such a way that they really have a truly fulfilling life on all levels. And so our guest today is Kathleen Shannon. She's the co-founder of Braid Creative, a branding agency that specializes in helping creatives, small businesses, and organizations blend more of who they are into the work that they do. Kathleen co-hosts the Being Boss podcast and also co-authored the Being Boss book with Emily Thompson, which is being released right now in April. Being Boss is where she digs into the mindset, the habits, routines, and boundaries that help creatives be more boss. With that, Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us here on One Idea Away.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I had the chance to check into was that you've got kind of a mantra, a life motto that really stood out to me. It wasn't what I was expecting to see from the Being Boss co-host, which was to be a farmer. And so I'm curious, what does that phrase, be a farmer, really mean to you?
Oh, I'm so glad that you asked about this, because this is a mantra that has guided me through my career as a creative entrepreneur, that has really kept me feeling productive. It's kept me feeling hopeful. It's kept me feeling, I don't know, what's the opposite of desperate? Because I feel like so often whenever you go into entrepreneurship and running your show and being a business person, you think about really hitting the pavement and kind of like that old-fashioned image of going door to door and just knocking and cold calling and all of these things that you think that you should be doing to get business. And I think of that as almost like a hunting model. Like you're out for the hunt and you're trying to close the deal, and there's so much importance placed on that. So early in my career, I thought, I want to be a farmer. I don't want to be a hunter. I don't want to feel that desperation. I cannot do my best creative work whenever I feel like I'm on the hunt. And so with that, I decided to become a farmer. And what that means is that I am planting seeds and I am nurturing them. I'm watering them. I'm giving them sunshine. I'm letting my harvest take time to grow. And I'm also seeing what happens from season to season. There are some things that are just out of our control. And so being a farmer allows me to recognize that there are more variables to this whole game than I'm even aware of, and just putting trust in the process. And so for me, farming especially looks like creating content, creating stuff that is so valuable, and just sharing my gifts of knowledge freely. So if I'm a farmer, I want to collect my harvest and give it out, and just share it at a dinner table with all of my favorite people and people I don't even know yet that I just want to have a really good conversation with. And so for me, that's looked like blogging and podcasting and connecting with other creatives at conferences and really just getting into those conversations with no ulterior motive. And it always leads to new clients. It always leads to positioning. The biggest surprise of being a farmer was accidentally positioning myself as an expert in my industry. I actually started my career with blogging. I was working as an art director full-time at an advertising agency. I had a day job. And I was just sharing my content on a blog. It was actually about, remodeling a house. But then as I decided to quit my job in advertising, I thought I would share the adventure of what it means to be a freelancer. And so I was talking about tricky situations like what to do whenever a client is unhappy, or even little things like how to upload specs to print and how I manage my projects and how I manage my time. And by sharing these things along the way, by being in it with people who were also new to freelancing, they were looking to me for guidance and advice, and just sharing what I knew, it went such a long way. And so for me, to sum it all up, that's what it means to be a farmer.
So I appreciate that. I want to come back to that the stories of how you kind of shook up your life and quit your job and everything else. I do want to come back to that part because I think it's an important part of the decision-making process that so many people are out there trying to consider for themselves of how they shift directions. But before we go there, I want to pull a few things out of what you just shared that I think are really important. I love the shift in perspective from hunting for, in this case, business as opposed to farming, because I also think that applies so much to the broad set of our lives of how often we go out there trying to hunt for the result, trying to get the payoff, trying to get the win very, very quickly for whatever it is that we're trying to achieve, attain for ourselves in life. And we don't take that longer view. Right. So our motivation all of a sudden is subject to, are we getting the outcome? Are we getting the result? Are we getting the payoff if we're trying to hunt? But if we go with that farming perspective, now we're taking a much longer, a more nurturing view. Kathleen, as you said, recognizing the changes from season to season, because it's not always the same season. There's different things required of us at different stages of our life and at different times of the cycles of growth that we go through, both personally as well as professionally. And I think the other thing it opens you to, which is so much fun as a creative, is not having that ulterior motive, not having that set agenda, meaning that you can go in willing to share the bounty of what it is that you've grown that given year, and just seeing what emerges from that. And it creates such a wonderful space of possibility. And that applies, again, this applies so much further than just our businesses and our professional lives. It applies to our personal lives as well as to how we can keep that possibility on our table to share with others at all times.
That's absolutely right. And whenever you were saying that, it also made me think that farming is kind of this abundance mindset. And I think that hunting is almost more of a lack mindset.
Definitely.
And so
Scarcity.
for me, And so for me, farming is definitely that abundance of, this crop is going to keep producing, and those seeds I'm going to be able to replant. And so, and I have to say though, I'm not opposed to hunting. And I found that the better I get at farming, the better I get at cultivating relationships and nurturing and giving as much away for free as I can, I am also attracting people who are like, wow, you're giving a lot away. Like what, I'm attracting like the good stuff. Right. Yeah. But then if I need to hunt, like if I have a bill I need to pay, I have put so much into my community that I can send out an email saying, hey, is anyone looking for branding, or is anyone looking for, this thing that I have to offer? Here's what I'm selling right now. And it's so much easier. Maybe it's not even hunting. Maybe that's more like fishing. I won't take this metaphor too far.
Well, it's funny because I already thought of it as harvesting, right? Because there's parts of the season where we've got to harvest. We've got to harvest the crops. We've got to bring them in from the field. And that's just what you're talking about, is recognizing where we are at those different times of the season. And again, I don't want to lose that perspective of how cumulative this type of an approach. So whether we move away from just the metaphor itself and look at this as a nurturing process, a growing type of process, there's a cumulative nature to it, so that there's stuff that's going to recur. There's stuff that you can build on year after year after year. And when you look behind those that have created both successful businesses and successful lives, it's never overnight. Right. It's the old tale of it took me 20 years to become the overnight success. Right. I mean, come on. We get to hear these wonderful stories in the news of the next billionaire that sold out to Google or Apple, but you don't hear about the 20 years that came before it. And when we use that nurturing growth mindset, it's a very, very different perspective. And frankly, you're also going to have a whole lot more fun along the way.
Absolutely.
Right. And so that's actually part of then I wanted to shift to understand a little bit about how you did shake up your life, because you entrepreneurism is something that's kind of run in your blood for quite a while. But you did choose to really kind of, shake up your life and move in this different direction. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that moment, that time of your life, because I think there's so many people that are out there that do struggle with feeling like they're getting pulled, like there's something calling them to a different direction, but actually making that jump and shifting away from what they already know and maybe the safety that they know is really disconcerting.
Oh, absolutely. And you said that entrepreneurship runs in my blood. And in fact, it kind of doesn't. I don't come from a family of entrepreneurs. And, in fact, my family is very much about the day job and the benefits and all the things that our parents want for us, right? And so I was the first in my family, aside from my brother, who's a sideshow performer, but that's a whole other story. But I was kind of the first in my family to really take this leap and say, hey, what would it look like to work for myself? And funny enough, the catalyst for this was that I had been watching a documentary on Mount Everest, and I knew that Mount Everest was the tallest mountain in the world, but I had no idea what a feat it was to actually take that trip, to climb up that mountain, to make it down alive. And I became enamored, and I knew that I wanted to see Mount Everest with my own two eyeballs. Like, I just had to go all the way. So I had planned a trek to go to Mount Everest Base Camp, and it's about a 3-week trip altogether. And I only had 2 weeks of paid vacation. So I didn't know how I was going to make it happen with this day job, how I was going to get to Mount Everest and keep my day job. So I quit. So part of this is because I was blogging at the same time, and I had actually gotten married and shared my wedding invitations on my blog, and they were really interesting and well-designed. And I started attracting a lot of kind of offbeat couples who wanted me to design their wedding invitations too. It was unlike anything that they had ever seen. And this was, right at the very beginning of Etsy really blowing up, and definitely pre-Pinterest. And so I started designing wedding invitations, and it was really fun because I come from a very strategic design background and an ad agency background, but to be able to do something that was designed for design's sake was a lot of fun. So I was blogging about these wedding invitations. I wanted to go to Mount Everest. It was kind of just a perfect storm of getting enough business on the side that, whenever it comes to taking this leap, I kind of think of it as building a bridge. You can tell I think in metaphors, where I'm trying to put one plank in front of another so that the leap doesn't feel quite so far. Like, I'm putting one plank in front of another, so I'm able to take one step at a time. And then maybe at the very end, there is, a leap that's just big enough that you're like, I might fall, but I think I can make it. That's the point where I quit my day job, where I was like, okay, I might fall, but I think I can make it. And for a lot of people, that's a certain number in their bank account. For some people, it's getting, there might be no amount of money in the bank account that will make them feel secure enough. So then it's really a mindset thing and cultivating that confidence and trusting themselves that they can take that next step. And so for me, shaking it up was going to Mount Everest. Changed my life.
That's fantastic. It's again, important perspective for people behind the scenes, that while at times it looks like big shifts are being made, and we hear that within people's stories, there is a transition period that goes into place. And it is something that you can prepare for, to give yourself a bit of the room so that if you are going to take one of those leaps, you have some period of time that you feel like you're still on, terra firma, as it were. And that's a very important part of this process anytime you go through major change within your life. And I think, Kathleen, part of what I also wanted to get into, because I think this idea of being boss is a really interesting perspective right now. As I kind of mentioned in the intro, it seems like there's more people that are looking to take control, as it were, of their lives, of their careers even, whether it's starting part-time businesses and freelance businesses and full-time businesses, second careers instead of going into retirement. Or even just that idea that even if they're, going into a job, they're taking responsibility for their career. It's not about working for somebody. It's really about managing themselves, and themselves almost as if they were their own business, as it were. And so I'm just kind of curious, from what you've seen in the conversations that you've had, what do you think is driving that pattern? Because it seems like more people are starting to investigate that road for themselves. And I'm just curious what you think is behind it. What's stirring people up in this manner?
Wow, that's a good question. And I think it, kind of goes back to your intro where it really is about alignment and finding freedom in that alignment. And I think that I can't pick apart like what's really been going on in the generations before us and what's led us to where we are today. But what I can see is that right now, more than ever, we're wanting to bring our whole selves to the table at all times. And so I'm bringing my most boss self to my family and bringing those skills to, to what I have at the dinner table. But then I'm also bringing who I am as a mom and as an adventurer and as a creative to my work. It is so important for me to blend who I am and that expression of who I am into the work that I'm doing. And I just think that we do better work whenever we can do that. And so, even after the Mount Everest adventure, I spent a whole month blogging about that. And there was no payoff. No one was paying, no one sponsored this trip, and no one was paying for me to really craft and capture and shape and share that story. But it fundamentally changed something. And I don't know if it was that people saw, oh, I can make a living doing what I love and go on adventure. Like, because I was sharing this like in the only place I had, like I wasn't separating my work blog from my life blog. I was sharing all of it in the same place. And I think that this happens for like moms too, or parents, both. But I think I see it a lot in the mom space where moms are sharing what it's like being a working mom. And so I think that whenever we can bring our whole selves to the table, that we are far more creatively fulfilled. And that's just becoming so much more important. I don't know why, but I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're definitely on track with that. I mean, there is. I mean, when even just you sharing your wedding invitations, using that as an example, the more that we share from that place of just who we are and what we've had fun with and what we enjoy, what we're going through, the reality of our experiences as well, there's something very natural and there's something very engaging about, people showing up that way. And so not only do we feel better about what we're sharing because it feels so much more authentic and like a true expression of who we are, but the people that begin to, whether it's the first 10 people that read the blog or the first 10,000 people that read the blog, they pick up on that authenticity. And I think that's, going back to that concept of alignment, I think that's one of the things that's drawing people in this type of direction is they want to feel that for themselves. It's a different form of freedom, the freedom to really truly be who we are and to express that into the world that it seems like more and more people are tuning into. And I guess, you use that phrase of your most boss self and showing up in the different parts of your life as your most boss self. Please share what is that idea? What is that mindset of being boss?
Yeah. So, you use the word authenticity, and I know that probably in both of our spaces, that word is being used
Overused,
a lot.
all over.
Which is a bummer because it's my favorite. It is a word that it is a value that drives almost every single decision I make. And so whenever it comes to being your most boss self, I think a big part of it is looking at what your values are. And it's so funny because whenever I take some of our listeners and some of my clients through a values exercise, and it's even in our book of looking at what your core beliefs are and what you would go to war for, like the stuff that you are willing to put up a fight for whenever it comes to your values. People will ask me, wait, so is this like in my life or at work? And I feel like it should be the same. Like if there is one thing I want for everyone who is wanting to be more boss, it is to be who they are 100% of the time. And that means that the values you're bringing to the table in your life, quote unquote, are the same values that you're bringing to your work. And so I think that really identifying your values is really huge whenever it comes to being boss. And also whenever it comes to, cultivating a boss mindset, I think that, the one thing I want people to do is to realize that they can make a living doing what they love. And, we're talking about like what has changed. And I think that the world is just so much more innovative and creative. And we have so many more opportunities, even with, the beginning of the internet. That wasn't until 1992. Like the world, is that right? 92? I could be wrong there.
Close.
Feel free to fact check me, but in other words, it hasn't been that long. No. I mean, it hasn't even been that long since women have been a major role in the workforce, and we see everything that's coming up around that. And I think that there's just huge opportunity right now for creativity and innovation. And whenever we can get aligned with our core values and what it is that we're best at and what we're here to do, I think that now is the time. So let's do it. Let's be more boss around it. But if we're looking at what's happened before us, it's really hard to see, like no one's made a path for you. I think we're at the point where we have to walk our own paths. And I think that we have to like learn how to trust ourselves, that we can do hard things, and that, you know, even if it leads us down an unfamiliar path, even if you can't see what's around the bend, that if you keep putting one foot in front of the other and trust the process and lean on your values to make decisions along the way, that you're going to get exactly where you need to go.
You know, it was something that Kathleen was just saying just a little while ago about being a boss, you know, being your most boss self. It's something incredible because when we bring this level of authenticity of who we are to what it is that we do and how it is that we do it, it has a funny way of supercharging our lives and our direction. Life becomes more fun, and those that we're meant to work with and connect with, they seem to gravitate towards us in an even more effortless way. So this week's One Idea Away reflection is on this question. How can you bring more of you into life and into all that you do? You see, this is an exercise, a reflection that's going to help you identify an area and maybe even several areas of your life where you aren't quite bringing your full self into it currently. It's going to help you connect to what life could look like when you step into it even more fully, what it will look like when you live even more aligned to your values. It'll help you picture how you'll show up, act, and relate differently as you do this, and it will ground it with actions and behaviors, the things that'll help you turn it into a reality. So just go ahead and head on over to oneideaaway.com/boss. That's oneideaaway.com/boss. Get your copy of this week's reflection, and then jump on over to our Facebook group to share your insights and have a conversation with others who are also declaring that it's time. It's time to bring even more of who you are into all aspects of your life. And it's a couple of things, one, just because I don't want to lose it, this idea of being able to do what you love. I think the piece for everybody, this is not just that line of, follow your passions and things like that. It's that there's so many new ways to do what you love. There's so many new possibilities being invented every single day, so that when you think about the things that you're really drawn to, the things that you have that love and that passion and the gifts and strengths around as well, what that may be, the form that it may take, may not even exist today. Things like I'll say for myself, and Kathleen, this may be true for you. I didn't know that I'd be podcasting one day, even though I always have loved, interviewing and being in conversation and connection with people. This was not a medium that I would have known to pursue 15 years ago, because it was not in the stratosphere out there. It was not in the cybersphere. And so things change so rapidly, and that's the beauty actually of some of what's coming out. So the more you get clear on what it is you love, there's so many different ways to pursue that, and so many ways to keep your eyes open to how that can ultimately come into existence for you. I think the thing I want to come back to is, I know this will probably tie to values, but part of being boss that I had seen in your book was also this idea of knowing what you want. And I wanted to go a little further into this and cover this a little bit, because I think this is also one of those areas that people get really, really, really hung up on, is that what we think we want is not always what we really want. And I was hoping you could help us kind of dive down into this idea of what is that we really want for ourselves, so that when we consider the life that we're building and how we're going to be boss, we really, truly are building it off of what's true and authentic to us.
You mentioned that phrase, follow your passion. I'm sure that we both have take issues with that phrase, right? Because it's sometimes hard to know, what am I passionate about? Especially if you have a bunch of life stresses being thrown your way. And I know I certainly do, as a working mom and as someone who's running a couple of businesses. Sometimes it's really hard. I just want a nap right now. So where I have to get really clear with what I want is to follow my curiosity. So forget following your passion, and instead follow your curiosity. Identify your values, and then start to bring intention. Start to wrap intention around your values by getting curious about how you bring those values into the world. I think that also, some just good old fashioned mood boarding and getting really clear about what it is that you want to be doing all day. And think about, I hear a lot of people who say, I want to be a creative entrepreneur, but I don't really know exactly what it is that I want to be doing. I just want to be inspiring to people, and I want to empower people. And that's too vague.
Yeah.
You have got to get specific, and you can get specific without knowing exactly what you want by getting into the feeling of how you want to feel. And so for me, I like to look at my dream day. I like to look at whenever I wake up in the morning, what's my morning routine look like? What am I drinking for breakfast? What am I eating for breakfast? What am I doing next? If I'm working, what kind of work am I doing? So I'm opening my laptop and I'm trying to imagine what's on the screen on my laptop, because this is where we get into doing the work. If I'm having a coffee meeting or a conversation with somebody, what am I talking about? Yeah. And so even to be sitting here on a podcast with you talking about creativity, this is a dream come true. And like you, it's something that I could never imagine, but I can see the breadcrumbs along the way that led me to this exact point where I am right now with you having this conversation about creativity and entrepreneurship by following my curiosity and staying true to my own values and letting those, help me make decisions along the way.
So again, something I don't want to let slip by because it was such a fun little phrase that you used there is doing mood boarding. I've heard of mood rings. I've heard of vision boarding. I had not heard of mood boarding, but it is that idea of tapping into the emotions. What is it that you want to be able to feel? Because then you can start to ask questions of what are the strengths? What are the gifts? What are the activities? What are the types of things that allow me to step into that feeling more often? And what does that tell me more about my values and how they play out and how they express themselves? What does it tell me about my gifts and the things that I could do all day long without even questioning it and feel like I have even more energy at the end of the day than I began with? It's a wonderful way of accessing into what you really truly are passionate about. And I love doing it through the process of curiosity. Wonderful way of describing that. Now, there's something else you bring up. And I know this is probably a very technical term for everybody to be able to understand, but it's the technical term of fraudy feelings that we have to deal with, right? And so I really I did want to talk about this because I think this is something that as certainly as entrepreneurs, but whether it be as a leader, whether it be even at times as a parent, this idea of dealing with the parts of ourselves that feel a little out of alignment, that feel fraudy, is actually something that comes up for a lot of us. And I was wondering if you could really truly dive into this technical aspect of fraudy feelings for us.
Yes, it is a very technical word. We are having the term fraudy feelings added to the dictionary. Some of you all may have heard this as imposter syndrome, and I have a few ways of tackling this. Sometimes, I've done some coaching myself and have been through coaching training. And I remember one time I felt like the worst coach ever because I actually told my client, like, listen, we're all going to die. Like, just do the thing, right? Like that's the one thing that's pretty certain is that we have a limited amount of time here. And I know that sounds really morbid. And I mean, Luke, you're probably like, this is the worst advice you could ever give to coaches whenever it comes to talking to their clients.
We get into this all the time.
Okay, good.
You're spot on.
For me, it really is rooted in this Stoic philosophy. Yeah. I mean, we talked about positive visualization and even, creating a vision board or mood board of what it is that you want to be doing. But I think that there is this quality of looking at your own mortality and knowing that, you have a 1 in 4 trillion chance of even being alive on earth. Like, do not squander that. Do the thing that you want to be doing. And so for me, that's huge. Like, just recognizing that there's a limited amount of time here and I'm here to do something, so I better get it done. And that it's okay to fumble along the way. We're all figuring it out. The other thing that I really like to do is I like to call on my mentors. And I like to do this by hosting a dinner party. And to this dinner party, I am inviting Beyonce. I'm inviting Bill Nye, the science guy. I'm inviting, who else have I invited before? I always have a comic at the table. So maybe right now it's Dave Chappelle. And of course, Oprah, like she's the queen, right? So I like to host a dinner party, and you all are probably wondering like, wow, Kathleen's connected. She's got some awesome friends. But here's the deal, that this isn't, obviously now at this point, you might realize that this is not a real dinner party. It is a dinner party in my head, but these people are very real mentors to me in my mind. And so what I do is I look at who they are. I look at their style, what they're wearing. I look at what they're bringing to this dinner party. I look at their expertise, what they know best. And I look at the advice that they would give me. I ask them questions and I say, okay, here's the thing that I'm struggling with. And it might be this fraudy feeling, right? What do they have to say about that? And it is always so incredibly powerful. Yeah. Sometimes I will listen, like overhear conversations between two guests at the dinner party. So listening to what Bill Nye and Beyonce have to say to each other makes for a really interesting conversation. And through this imaginary dinner party, I'm able to connect new dots. I'm able to think new ideas. And through this, I'm able to cultivate a little bit more confidence by just calling on these inner mentors.
When you create a scene along those lines, and you bring in, I've heard others use this idea of bringing in your board of advisors, if we take it more out of maybe the executive coaching space and things like that. But whether it be the dinner party, the board of advisors, you're inviting these trusted mentors, even if it's through visualization, into a given space. And it's amazing how creating something along those lines in visualization taps you into your intuition, because it moves you past what is your typical critical mind, and it moves you into this space of possibility. It moves you into the space of ideas. And it really is, it's an amazing type of a process that it can open up to people. And so that's a really unique way. Going back to, you talk about all of our mortality. One of the things, and I think this is the reason why we bring it up, and I bring it up all the time, is that at the end of the day, the number one regret of the dying is that they did not have the courage to be true to themselves. And that when we have not been true to ourselves, that's the type of thing that we're going to regret at end of life. And so if we need a little kick in the pants to envision yourself out that far, looking back in your life, where are the moments where you wish you were truer to who you are and had more courage to follow that path? I think that's a wonderful way, actually, to be able to reflect and to give us some of that motivation, that drive, and that courage to be able to take some action that otherwise may be pretty difficult and pretty daunting at times. So I think that's actually really, really helpful from a perspective for us to be able to take a look at. Just as we start to kind of bring ourselves around full circle, before we totally wrap up, you talk about the need for everybody to have their own wolf pack. And so I don't believe that we're simply talking about Zach Galifianakis and The Hangover. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what do you mean by the wolf pack, and what does it mean? Why is it so critical for us to have this in our lives?
You're the first person to have caught that reference.
Really?
That is absolutely where it comes from. But, this idea of having a wolf pack, of having your tribe, is so incredibly important. We're not in this alone. And the more we realize that we're connected and the more we can ask for help, the farther we're going to go. And so if there's one thing I learned, I even started a podcast with my co-host, Emily, because we were having what we call business bestie conversations, and we are a part of each other's wolf pack. And we realized that we were having conversations that a lot of other creatives were not having. Solopreneurs who are sitting at home working by themselves and feeling really lonely. And so we hit publish on our conversations so that people could see that talking about things like money and talking about strategy and talking about where we're struggling in work and life can be so beneficial. And so this is where your wolf pack comes in. These are people that you want to collaborate with and create with. And, everyone says it takes a village, but we've got to practice what that actually means. So that might mean sending your kid to daycare. That's your village. That might mean asking your friends to help you launch your next project. That's what that means. And so your wolf pack, it's your inner circle of people that you can trust, and you want to find those people. And I'm sure that, your community here, it's like built out of community. Like you can find like-minded people so easily with the internet, and you're not alone. Like that's what everyone needs to know, is that you're not alone. We're all connected. And if you can find your wolf pack, you're solid.
Love that. You're not alone. You're not alone. You're not alone. Just keep repeating that, guys, because there's so much of that out there. And I know as solopreneurs and just as individuals, it can be so easy to fall into that period and that time and that energy of, oh, this is so tough and I'm so isolated. But you're not alone. And just like, Kathleen, as you're describing, with what Being Boss is doing, it's what One Idea Away is doing, is how do we bring more and more people together so you recognize the shared mindset, the like-heartedness of all of us, so that we can do more and more together to inspire our individual paths, not just our collective ones. And so, Kathleen, I guess maybe as we kind of, bring this conversation around, it seems that, your podcast, your book, your work overall, has this intent of not only getting people to reflect on these issues, but also to inspiring them to take action, to begin to integrate this more and more into their lives. And so one of the things that we love to do is to think about what's the ongoing conversation that can get stirred up by these types of interviews, these type of chats. And so I'm just curious, what's the conversation that you hope that our audience will continue after our time together today?
Ooh, so I think that the prompt that I would give to your audience would be, what does it mean to do the work? And so, we've talked about alignment, we've talked about values, we've talked about intention, but it does come down to taking action. And what does that look like? So whenever we were writing our book, we went to our own listeners and our own audience of our podcast and said, if there's one thing that we are always saying that really stands out to you, what is it? And our listeners said, you always tell us to do the work. It is about taking that action. And we all get to define what that means for us. So that's the conversation that I want everyone to keep having, is what does it look like to do the work?
Kathleen, I love it. I want to thank you for dropping in on One Idea Way and sharing what it means to be a boss.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's been so fun.
For everybody, I want to encourage you to check out Being Boss, the podcast. Start to look for Being Boss as it starts to hit the shelves and the online shelves as a book as well. All sorts of things to check out. Just as a kind of that wrap up thought, and it's something that seems to also be a conversation I'm having a lot of recently, is that we want both the insights, the ideas, the inspiration out of conversations and out of reflection as much as we can, because those are the things that ultimately stir us up inside and have the power to shift who we are and shift our consciousness. However, the shift doesn't occur unless we take action. We've got to integrate. We've got to create the new experiences. And even if it's just small steps along the way to be able to do so, they're necessary, because it's only when we take that action does the shift really, truly start to integrate into who we are, how we show up, and who it is that we're becoming. And so once again, I want to thank you for dropping in on One Idea Way. And until next time, as always, continue to enjoy the journey. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you really enjoyed it, do me a favor, let us know. You can keep the conversation going and send us a message on our Facebook page, which is simply One Idea Away. Go ahead and tag me in the post, or even just direct messages. Also, I would be incredibly grateful if you could share this episode along with someone that you believe could benefit from hearing the ideas and the messages that we got into. That's pretty much why we do this. So you can just go ahead and share it from your app or email it along, whatever works for you. The point is to share, to talk, to discuss, and keep the dialogue going, because it's in those conversations that ideas can take hold and create profound shifts in perspective. That's what allows us to live life more fully, deeply, and consciously. As always, we would love to see you post a review for the podcast in iTunes or whichever app you're using. And until next time, remember, you're never more than one idea away from a whole new reality. This is Luke Iorio and One Idea Away, signing off.